Well, with the government shut down and ICE agents and National Guard pouring into liberal cities like Chicago and Portland, Democrats are warning that we are heading for a civil war. Where have we heard this before? They're trying to scare us once again. Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat, now says expect a civil war-style uprising across this country.
We are going to fight it.
With the government shut down, now is the time for liberals to fight back against ICE and the National Guard. He warned months ago, by the way, that he was going to fight in the streets. Watch.
We are going to fight it in the courts, and we're going to fight it in the streets.
Now you have these activist judges who are trying to block Trump's moves into these cities, and liberal mayors now enacting what they're calling ICE-free zones across the city. ICE isn't allowed to do their job, essentially. In Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson just signed an executive order setting up one of these ICE-free zones. Just signed that executive order. Judge Andrew Napolitano is the host of Judging Freedom on the great Judging Freedom podcast and one of the smartest people that we know. And when all of this is hitting the fan, you get the liberals on one side, you get the conservatives on the other, you get the Trump administration saying one thing, you get liberal mayors saying another thing. We want to go to the judge to get the truth here. Judge, great to see you. I guess let's unpack these ICE-free zones.
Pleasure to be on with both of you. Thank you.
Always great to have you, Judge. So when you look at Brandon Johnson in Chicago and these ICE-free zones in this executive order, does it have any teeth, and what will the Trump administration be able to do?
The short answers are no and almost whatever it wants if it follows the law. So when the feds come into a municipality to enforce a federal law, the feds are superior to local law enforcement. They cannot commandeer local law enforcement to help them or to do their job for them, but law enforcement cannot interfere. So as offensive as it is to some people for ICE to be wearing masks, a California statute prohibiting law enforcement from wearing masks is enforceable only against California law enforcement, not against the feds. I mean, the short answer is that the state can look the other way and not help the feds, but it cannot aggressively interfere. The problem with ICE is that it is using an instrument which has never been ruled on by the Supreme Court to effectuate these arrests, and it's called an administrative warrant. It is not an arrest warrant based on the Constitution. It is something crafted by low-level courts to make ICE's job easier for it. There is no standard that ICE must meet in order to effectuate the warrant. So if they walk into a warehouse or an industrial facility where they see people who look like they're Hispanic and they say in Spanish, who here speaks Spanish, and everybody raises their hands, they proceed to arrest those people. Now, speaking Spanish or raising your hands is not evidence of any criminality and would never hold water if the Fourth Amendment were applied, which says arrests can only occur pursuant to a warrant based upon a probable cause sworn to by a judge. However, because this is a quasi-public place, where ICE can just walk in a warehouse. It's private property, but it's quasi-public, meaning anybody could walk in there. The lower courts have allowed these arrests. The Supreme Court has never ruled on the constitutionality of administrative warrants, and most judges, including this retired one, speaking to you now, believe that these administrative warrants are unconstitutional and should not be complied with. But that's what ICE is doing. As a result, they sweep up all kinds of people, including American citizens, who sometimes spend a day or two in detention until each person is examined. The Fourth Amendment requires this examination before arrest.
So let's talk a little bit, though, about the precedents, because Gavin Newsom is gaining a lot of popularity on X by talking tough about suing the Trump administration, saying we're not going to allow you to take our National Guard over to Oregon. You can't do that. But the California ruling the courts ruled that the California deployment was legal because it was the National Guard protecting federal places and federal buildings. And that is something that I think the media sort of overlooks. They're acting like Trump has troops patrolling the streets like stormtroopers. What he can do is protect federal places, which is what was done in California. So if he continues to have that as his intention in, say, Chicago and Portland, then Democrats are just screaming dumb things, right? So can you make that distinction?
Well, in the California case, there was an actual trial. It was in San Francisco. I don't know why the trial was in San Francisco when everybody involved in the case was 400 miles to the south in Los Angeles. But the trial judge there, who was partially affirmed and partially overruled, found that the feds were chasing drunk drivers, arresting drug dealers, even chasing shoplifters. Well, the police like it.
Well, heaven forbid, right, that should happen.
Well, the federal law forbids that. The police like it because it's more cops on the street, or it's more authority on the street doing their job. But federal law expressly prohibits troops from engaging in law enforcement. So after this judge barred the federal troops, the appellate court said, well, we'll bar them from engaging in law enforcement, but we can't bar them from protecting federal assets because there's another federal statute that says the president can use them for federal assets. So if the troops were used only to protect federal assets, which means a federal building and federal employees, then it's perfectly constitutional. But if they're being used for law enforcement purposes because the president believes that it will help law enforcement and will make the streets safer, he can't do that without Congress changing the law.
Right. But I mean, imagine, oh no, they were chasing drunk drivers. I realize that that's outside the purview of the law, but why would you
Here's what happened.
Not want that?
A lot of the troops were not trained in ordinary law enforcement. They weren't trained in stopping people. They weren't trained in giving the Miranda warning. They weren't trained in preservation of evidence. So a lot of people that were arrested by the troops in Los Angeles, scot-free, they can't be prosecuted because the troops didn't know what rules to follow when it came to arrest. Now, you could teach someone how to do an arrest in about a week, but you can't do it in a few hours on the streets.
You know, I honestly couldn't do this job every day if it wasn't for ExpressVPN. That's not an exaggeration. Every single day that I need to check websites, read reports, access sources from around the world, I need to use ExpressVPN because the truth is many of those websites are censored. This just happened to me. In fact, I was in the UK, I was in Scotland, and I had to jump on a couple of different websites. I couldn't, they were blocked. And without ExpressVPN, I would have been completely cut off, unable to access different websites while I was there. So here's how it works. ExpressVPN lets you change your online location instead of being stuck with the version of the internet that your government wants you to see. You can connect through one of ExpressVPN's secure servers in another country. That means if a site is blocked in the UK, I can instantly connect through a US server and bam, it's wide open. Same thing if you want to access more shows or streaming services, you're no longer limited to what's available in your country. It's not just about censorship. ExpressVPN also encrypts your internet connection so your personal data is secure. Not hackers, not corporations, not even internet providers can track what you're doing. It's about privacy. It's about online freedom. So don't wait until you run into some kind of a wall like I have. Take back control of your internet today. Find out how you can get up to 4 months free by clicking the link in the description box below, or just scanning the QR code that's right on your screen, or go to expressvpn.com/redacted. Again, find out how you can get up to 4 months free by clicking that link in the description or scanning that QR code on the screen. Visit expressvpn.com/redacted.
Okay.
What about this sanctuary city component of all of this? Does that come into play here, Judge?
Well, that Clayton, that is a facade. Well, let me explain it. If by sanctuary city is meant the feds can't come in, then it's a facade. If by sanctuary city is meant state or city employees are not going to help the feds, well, that is lawful. In an opinion written by Justice Scalia called Prince versus the United States, we're now in the Clinton era, where Congress enacted gun regulations and said, we're going to require the states to enforce it. Justice Scalia wrote a very famous opinion saying, well, you can't do that. You can't commandeer state assets to enforce federal law. So the state cannot actively interfere, but it can refuse to cooperate. So it depends what is meant by sanctuary city. If by sanctuary city is meant feds go home, not going to work. If by sanctuary city is meant our people are not going to help you, you're going to have to enforce federal law on your own, well, that's what the Supreme Court has authorized.
Can I ask you another question? This has been sticking in my brain for a while. We saw this in Washington, D.C., Judge, which is obviously a weird animal because it's the District of Columbia, but nonetheless, you had basically military tribunals. You had military lawyers coming into D.C. because, if I'm not mistaken, military judges as well, where they had to come in because can you really trust, in this liberal city, can you trust that they're going to get fair hearing here? And the Trump administration was doing this. They were bringing in these individuals into the city to basically put them through a military style hearing instead of a normal, like, civilian style process.
I have never heard of this. I knew that there were military lawyers there, but that was to advise the commanders on what the troops can do and what not to do. But a military tribunal would have no jurisdiction over civilians arrested by the military. It only has jurisdiction over combatants, whether lawful or unlawful, arrested by the military. And a combatant,
would they be considered a combatant? I mean, if you have these federal forces that are being attacked by Antifa and they're now labeled as a domestic terrorist organization, would that be an unlawful combatant?
But there is no such thing as a domestic terrorist, right? I mean,
ask again, please. I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, we were talking over each other. There's really no such thing as a domestic terrorist.
Correct.
So,
that is a phrase. I won't say the president made it up because it's been around for a while, but that's a non-legal phrase that the president used. The technical phrase is enemy combatant, lawful and unlawful. So a lawful enemy combatant means that the United States has declared war on another country, or another country has declared war on the United States, and this human being is in uniform and is a soldier for the other country and gets arrested. That is a lawful enemy combatant. If he takes his uniform off and comes behind enemy lines, he comes to the United States, that is an unlawful enemy combatant. Both of those people are entitled to trials by a military tribunal, but under no circumstances are civilians not affiliated with a foreign government entitled to military tribunals. Clayton, this is the first time I've heard that there were or may have been tribunals in D.C.
Yeah, we covered it a few weeks ago here on the show. I mean, I guess bottom line, Judge, is that, to your point, ICE has the authority here. The federal government has the authority. These mayors signing these ICE-free zones is just political theater.
Correct.
Right?
It is the mayors, and in the case of Gavin Newsom, a governor, playing to their base. But they know, or they should have lawyers that work for them who will tell them this is legally moot. This is legally meaningless.
Now, something I like to follow the Straight Down the Middle podcast from Jed Rubenfeld, and he has said many times that the president has the authority to do this under federal law, but if it extends beyond the scope of an emergency that he has surmised exists, then we might have some government overreach. Do you agree with that? Do you think that there is some power overreach that is concerning you right now from the Trump administration?
Well, the president can only declare emergency in an area that is federal, and public safety is not federal. It is retained by the states. It's that area of governance never delegated away. That's the theory under which the federal judge in Portland ruled last Friday and then again last Sunday. So if the president's going to declare an emergency, it would have to be, well, people can't get in the courthouse because the demonstrations are so thick around the courthouse. Well, that would be an emergency if a federal facility were shut down. But if there's a lot of shoplifting, or if there are demonstrations in the streets that are antagonistic to ICE, but they're not stopping traffic, that would not be a basis for an emergency. Now, that's one side of this. The other side of this is the Supreme Court has ruled that there is no such thing as emergency jurisdiction, that the rules apply no matter how bad things are in the streets. And that ruling was based on the Civil War, when people were killing each other in the streets. That's still good law today.
I guess final question, Judge. When you hear Hakeem Jeffries saying, we're going to fight this in the streets, is that an incitement to violence? I mean, you're basically telling people to.
Clayton, I think that's a very dangerous statement for a person in the government, particularly a person in leadership, to make. I'm sure if he were put under oath, he would say, we're going to fight it in the streets peacefully by demonstrating. And the law is, when you're talking about speech, if there is any lawful interpretation of the speech, then the prosecution for speech fails. So that would probably be his defense. But the clip that you played doesn't have the caveat in it, and I think is dangerous for him to say.
I mean, they did take Trump off of social networks for that. That's an interesting choice after championing the president being taken off. So, okay.
Well, the people that run the social networks are probably a lot closer to Hakeem Jeffries than they are to Donald Trump.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Judge, great to see you. Thank you so much for this. As always, great to have you here. Oh, and I should point out, over 600 of these military lawyers were brought in. A number of them were then being used as immigration judges in D.C. and other areas to expedite and go through.
That is lawful, and that is actually a smart use of their talent, and that I was aware of. Perhaps that is what we were talking about. So immigration courts do not have juries. They're not military tribunals. They are civilian lawyers. But if a military lawyer puts on civilian garb and becomes an immigration judge, in my view, that is a wise use of that person's talent, and there's absolutely no constitutional impediment to it. These are not Article III judges nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Immigration judges are lawyers hired by the Department of Homeland Security.
Understood.
Great distinction. Okay, great to know. Yeah, the liberal media was slamming President Trump for an overreach of authority. Of course. Judge, great to see you as always. Follow the Judging Freedom podcast. Had a great interview with Jeffrey Sachs just the other day on what's going on with, I think it was, you guys were specifically focused on Israel, but what do you have coming up on your show?
I have Colonel Douglas McGregor tomorrow on whether or not Iran will be able to penetrate Israel's American defenses. He doesn't think so. He also thinks the war is coming any day now. So he and I will be talking about that tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern, and then, of course, post it for people to view at any time. I also have my other regulars on, but he's the superstar tomorrow.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well,
Judge,
you're the superstar also. I've seen how people react to you in person. And yes, you've got the star
McGregor
quality that keeps people subscribed.
Thank you. Colonel McGregor and I just spent a weekend together in Dallas where we addressed a group of, shall I say, anti-war, pro-peace, libertarian Republicans in Dallas. And they loved what the Colonel had to say. And I think they appreciate it.
Well, they're out there. Yeah. They're out there. I know. I mean, we got tens of thousands of people watching our show right now.
They're fans of Redacted, that's for sure.
Yeah, they are sick of these wars, and the people that watch our show are in lockstep there on that point, and are sick of the uniparty and don't like sycophants for Trump. That's for sure. Judge, great to see you. Good luck with the show, and thanks so much as always.
All the best.